My name is Grace, and I learned the hard way that a person can give their whole soul to a family that views them as nothing more than a rag to wipe their feet. On the day my fiancé, David, was supposed to return from London after 5 long years, I was not dressed like a bride-to-be. I was on my knees in the dusty compound of the Benson family, scrubbing the stones until my fingernails bled. I had spent my morning preparing his favorite delicacies, but his mother, Mrs Benson, was never satisfied. As I scrubbed, she walked past and intentionally kicked my bucket of soapy water. The dirty foam splashed over my head, soaking my only good dress. "You clumsy goat," she screamed, her voice piercing the quiet afternoon. "Do you want my son to see a beggar when he enters this gate? Move your wretched self to the backyard before the real guests arrive." Just then, a shiny black car pulled into the driveway. My heart leaped. David was home. I wiped my eyes, ready to run to him, but the door opened and David stepped out. He didn't look for me. Instead, he turned and held the door for a woman dressed in expensive silk. "Grace," David said coldly, looking at my soaked hair, "carry Sarah's bags to the master bedroom. Don't touch the white ones with your dirty hands." If you are watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are watching my folktale story from. I want to know how far it has traveled. The weight of the suitcases felt like lead, but the weight in my chest was heavier. As I hauled Sarah's luggage up the stairs, my mind raced back to the day David left for England. We were so in love. He had no money for his visa, no money for his tuition, and his family was struggling. I was the one who sold the small plot of land my grandfather left me. I was the one who worked 3 jobs, selling bread in the morning, sewing clothes in the afternoon, and cleaning offices at night, just to send him monthly allowance. I remember his voice on the phone 3 years ago, promising me that once he finished his master's degree, he would come back and make me the happiest woman in the world. I believed him. Because of that love, I moved into his family house to care for his mother and his 2 sisters, Clara and Mary. I thought I was serving my future in-laws, but they saw me as a slave who cost them nothing. They took my money and gave me insults in return. Now, David was standing in the living room, laughing with a woman who looked like she had never seen a day of hard work in her life. That night, the house was filled with the smell of the fried chicken and jollof rice I had spent hours cooking. I stood by the kitchen door, waiting for David to call me, to at least ask how I had been. But he sat at the head of the table, flanked by Sarah and his mother. "David," I whispered, stepping into the light, "I haven't even had a moment to welcome you properly. I missed you so much." David didn't even look up from his plate. It was Sarah who spoke first, her voice dripping with fake pity. "Oh, David, is this the house girl you mentioned in your emails? She looks so tired, poor thing." Mrs Benson laughed loudly, patting Sarah's hand. "She's just a distant relative we took in out of charity, Sarah. Don't mind her." My breath caught in my throat. A relative? I was the woman who paid for the roof over their heads. "David, tell them," I cried out. David finally looked at me, but his eyes were like ice. "Grace, don't make a scene. Life abroad has changed my perspective. You should be grateful my mother still lets you stay here. Now go and sleep in the storehouse. Sarah needs the guest room for her skincare routine." The storehouse was cold and smelled of damp earth and old sacks of cocoa. I lay on a thin mat, staring at the dark ceiling, hot tears tracking down my face. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the laughter from the main house. I heard the clinking of glasses I had bought with my own savings. How could a man forget so easily? How could his mother, who cried on my shoulder when she was sick and I paid her hospital bills, call me a charity case? I felt like a fool. I had poured my life into a cracked pot, and now I was thirsty with nothing to drink. The next morning, I was woken up by Clara kicking my feet. "Wake up, lazy girl. Sarah wants her breakfast served in bed and the laundry is piling up. I dragged my aching body to the kitchen. As I prepared the tray, I saw Mrs. Benson showing Sarah a gold necklace. My heart stopped. That was the necklace I gave Mrs. Benson to keep safe for me. It was my mother's only wedding gift to me. "It looks beautiful on you, Sarah," Mrs. Benson cooed. "Only a sophisticated woman deserves such gold." By noon, my head was spinning. I hadn't eaten properly in days, and the emotional shock was draining my strength. As I was hanging the heavy wet blanket on the line, the world suddenly tilted. My knees buckled, and I collapsed onto the hard ground. I didn't black out completely, but I couldn't move. I heard footsteps. It was Mary and Clara. "Look at her," Mary hissed, poking me with her foot. "She's trying to play the victim again. She probably thinks if she faints, David will pity her." Clara laughed and poured a cup of cold water on my face. "Get up, Grace. You are not pregnant, so stop acting like you have a reason to be tired. You're just a village girl who doesn't know her place." They walked away, leaving me shivering in the dirt. I realized then that they didn't just dislike me, they hated me because they owed me everything. They needed to crush me so they wouldn't have to feel guilty for stealing my life. I managed to crawl to the edge of the compound, leaning against the fence. I felt so alone. But what I didn't know was that eyes were watching me from the bushes across the road. Behind the thick hibiscus bushes across the road, two people stood in shocked silence. It was my father, Mr. Thompson, and my mother. They had traveled from our village to surprise me, wanting to see the palace I had described in my letters. My father, a man who had spent 30 years as a school principal, clutched his walking stick so hard his knuckles turned white. He had just watched his only daughter being poked with a foot and doused with water like a stray dog. My mother's eyes were brimming with tears, but she held my father's arm firmly. "Not yet," she whispered, as he moved to storm the gate. "If we take her now, they will claim she stole from them or ran away. We must be wise." They watched as I struggled to my feet, my clothes stained with mud, my spirit visibly broken. My father's heart broke seeing the girl he raised to be a queen being treated like a slave. They stayed in the shadows, witnessing the moment David walked onto the porch and shouted at me to stop lounging around and go scrub the pots. They saw the truth that my pride had kept hidden from them for 5 years. That night, while the Benson house was loud with music, I felt a pebble hit the wooden shutter of the storehouse. I opened it cautiously and my breath hitched. "Papa? Mama?" I whispered, my voice trembling. My father reached through the window and touched my face. "My child," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "we have seen everything." I began to sob, the shame I had carried finally breaking me. "I'm so sorry, Papa. I wanted to help him. I thought he loved me." My mother hushed me gently. "Dry your eyes, Grace. Your kindness is not a weakness, but their greed is their trap." My father leaned in closer. "We are going back to the village tonight to gather what we need. You must stay for 2 more days. Do not let them know we were here. We are not just coming to take you home. We are coming to reclaim your life. When the sun sets on the 2nd day, the village will know who the Bensons truly are." They disappeared into the night, leaving me with a flicker of hope that felt like a roaring fire in my cold room. The next morning, the house was a whirlwind of activity. "The big day is here," Mrs. Benson announced, clapping her hands. David was officially announcing his engagement to Sarah, and the entire community was invited. I was forced to wash the floors, polish the silver, and carry heavy crates of drinks from the village market. My back felt like it was breaking, but I walked with a strange calmness. I watched Sarah lounging in a chair, complaining that the African sun was too harsh for her foreign skin. She wore a dress that cost more than my father's yearly pension, a dress bought with money David had begged me for, claiming it was for his final exams. Every time I walked past them, Clara or Mary would trip me or mock my tattered shoes. "Make sure the drinks are cold, Grace," Clara sneered. "We wouldn't want Sarah's wealthy friend to think we have a servant who doesn't know her job." I said nothing. I just looked at the sun, counting the hours until my father's promise would come to pass. The party was grand. The elite of our town and the village elders sat under white canopies, fanning themselves as music filled the air. I was moving through the crowd with a heavy tray of expensive wine, my head bowed. An elder named Mr. Oke stopped me. He had known my father for years. "Wait, is this not Grace, the principal's daughter?" he asked, squinting at my haggard face. Before I could answer, Mrs. Benson rushed over, her face twisted in a fake smile. "Oh, Elder Oke, don't mind her. This is just a distant orphan we took in out of pity. She's a bit slow in the head, poor thing. Grace, get moving. The guests are thirsty." I felt the sting of her words, but I also felt the eyes of the village on me. I accidentally stumbled and a glass fell, shattering near Sarah's feet. "You stupid girl!" Sarah screamed, standing up and pointing a finger at me. "David, look at what this creature did to my shoes. She's doing this on purpose because she's jealous of my beauty." David walked over and in front of everyone, grabbed my arm and shook me. "Get out of my sight," David hissed, his voice loud enough for the elders to hear. "You are an embarrassment to this family." I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized the man I loved never existed. As I turned to run toward the storehouse, a hand caught mine. It was my father. But he wasn't alone. He was dressed in his finest traditional attire, looking every bit the respected man he was. Beside him was my mother, and a man carrying a leather briefcase. "Grace, don't move a muscle," my father said, his voice booming like thunder across the quieted party. He looked at David and then at Mrs. Benson. "I heard you call my daughter an orphan," my father said, stepping into the center of the circle. "And I heard you call her a servant." The music stopped. The guests leaned in. My father reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick folder. "I have here the receipts of every penny my orphan daughter sent to this house while you were begging for bread. It is time for a real accounting." He handed me a smaller envelope. "Open it, Grace. Show them what you actually own." I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a document I hadn't expected. A registered business license and a land title in my name. While I was sending money to David, my father had insisted on documenting a portion of it as a formal investment into a family poultry business. "You see," my father addressed the crowd, "while my daughter was being treated as a slave, she was actually the one bankrolling this family's sudden wealth." Mrs. Benson's face turned a ghostly shade of grey. She tried to laugh it off, turning to the guests. "This old man is senile. David, tell them your beautiful Sarah brought the money from her rich family in the city." But Sarah looked uncomfortable. She started backing away from the spotlight, her eyes darting toward the gate. I looked at the folder and saw bank statements showing that the allowance David sent home to his mother for the new roof was actually transferred directly from my savings account. The crowd began to murmur, the atmosphere shifting from a celebration to a courtroom. The elders stood up, their faces stern. They didn't like being lied to, and they certainly didn't like seeing a daughter of the soil humiliated. Sarah suddenly spoke up, her voice shrill and desperate. "David, are you going to let these village people insult me? I don't care about their receipts. You told me you were a millionaire with a mansion." David looked trapped. He reached out to touch Sarah's arm, but she slapped it away. "Wait," I said, finding my voice for the first time in years. "Sarah, did he tell you he owned this house? Because I have the building receipts right here. Every bag of cement was paid for by the bread I sold while he was studying in London." The crowd gasped. Sarah turned to David, her eyes wide with fury. "You lied to me? You told me your family owned half this town?" It was a beautiful moment of irony. The two liars had found each other, each thinking the other was a golden ticket to a life of luxury. David looked at his mother, but Mrs. Benson was too busy trying to hide the gold necklace, my mother's necklace, behind her collar. The royal family of the village was crumbling right before our eyes, and the guests were capturing every moment of the drama. "Enough of this theater!" Mrs. Benson screamed, trying to regain control. "Grace,
Pack your rags and leave this house this instant. I don't care whose money it is. I am the mistress of this home and I want you out." She stepped forward and grabbed my arm to drag me toward the gate, but my mother stepped in between us. My mother, usually so quiet, looks like a lioness. "Don't you dare touch her," she said, her voice low and dangerous. At that moment, 3 large black SUVs pulled into the dusty compound, blocking the exit. The dust settled, and several men in official uniforms stepped out, accompanied by a woman in a sharp suit. The woman walked straight to my father and shook his hand. "Mr. Thompson, we are ready to proceed with the audit and the recovery of assets as requested." The guests stood on their chairs to see. The village was used to drama, but they had never seen anything like this. My father looked at David. "David, you thought Grace was alone. You forgot that a tree is only as strong as its roots." The woman in the suit was a forensic accountant my father had hired with the last of his savings. She opened a laptop right there on the party table. "We have traced the funds," she announced loudly. "Over the last 5 years, approximately $15,000 was transferred from Grace Thompson to David Benson for educational purposes. However, we have a letter from the university in London stating that David was withdrawn in his second year for non-payment and academic failure." A heavy silence fell over the compound. David's master's degree was a lie. He had spent 3 years living on my hard-earned money while doing nothing. The wealth he brought home was just the last bit of my savings he had squeezed out of me for a final project. David sank into a chair, his head in his hands. Sarah let out a scream of disgust. "You failure! You dragged me to this bush for nothing!" She grabbed her designer purse and tried to run to the cars, but the town union chairman blocked her path. "No one leaves until the truth is settled," he declared. The town union chairman, a man of great authority, signaled for the drums to stop. "In our land," he began, his voice echoing, "to take from a woman who gives you her life is a curse. To treat a bride-to-be as a servant is a taboo." He turned to David's father, who had been hiding in the house out of shame. "Elder Benson, come out and face the village." The older man walked out, trembling. The chairman continued, "Your family has eaten the sweat of this girl. You have used her to build your walls and fill your bellies while you mocked her father's name. This is not just a debt of money, it is a debt of honor." He looked at the gathered crowd. "What is the custom when a man obtains a dowry and labor under false pretenses?" The elders shouted back in unison, "Repayment or exile." Mrs. Benson started to wail, falling to the ground and pulling at her hair. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she got caught. My father stood tall, holding my hand. "We are not here for your tears," he said coldly. "We are here for justice." The village square was packed. News had traveled like wildfire that the London big boy was a fraud and his family were thieves. I stood beside my parents, feeling a strange mix of sadness and strength. David, his mother, and his sisters were forced to sit on low wooden stools in the center of the circle, a sign of great humiliation for a titled family. The town union chairman looked at the forensic report and then at David. "David Benson," he began, "you took the life savings of this girl. You watched her serve your sisters like a slave while you promised her marriage. Is it true that you were deported for fraud and never finished your schooling?" David couldn't even lift his head. He nodded slowly and a roar of disapproval went up from the villagers. Sarah sat on a bench nearby, looking like a trapped bird. She tried to distance herself, but the chairman pointed at her. "And you, the city woman, you were wearing the gold of another woman's mother. Give it back now." Sarah hurriedly unclipped the necklace and threw it into the dust. My mother stepped forward, picked it up, and wiped it clean with her wrapper. Mrs. Benson tried to speak, her voice cracking with desperation. "We only wanted the best for our son. Grace was just a village girl. She wouldn't have understood the life David was building." My father stepped forward, his voice calm but sharp as a razor. "The life he was building with her money? You fed your ego with her blood. You told the village she was a charity case so that no one would ask why she was the one doing all the work." He turned to the chairman. "We are not here to beg for an apology. We have filed a formal report with the police for obtaining under false pretenses.
David did not just break a heart, he stole a destiny. The village elders nodded in agreement. In our custom, a man's word is his bond, and David had broken every bond he ever made. The chairman looked at the Benson family. Because you used her money to build that house no longer belongs to you until every kobo is paid back with interest. You have 30 days. The days that followed were a whirlwind. David's wealthy friends from the city disappeared as soon as they realized he was broke. Sarah was the first to pack her bags. I watched from the gate of my father's new house as she screamed at David one last time. I thought you were my ticket to London. You're just a pathetic liar in a cheap suit. She didn't even look back as she boarded a bus to the city. David was left standing in the middle of the road, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. His sisters, Clara and Mary, who used to walk with their noses in the air, were now seen at the village stream, trying to hide their faces from the other women who mocked them. "Where are your servants now?" the village girls would laugh. The tables had turned so fast that the Bensons didn't know how to breathe. They had built their palace on sand, and the tide had finally come in to wash it all away. One evening, while I was helping my father organize the accounts for our new poultry farm, there was a scratching at our door. It was David. He looked haggard, his clothes unwashed. He fell to his knees as soon as I opened the door. "Grace, please," he sobbed, reaching for my feet. "I made a mistake. My mother pushed me to find a classy woman, but it was always you. I can make it right. We can still get married. I will work for you. I will do anything." I looked down at him and felt nothing. No anger, no love, just pity. "David," I said quietly, "you didn't make a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to put salt in the soup. What you did was a choice. You chose to watch me suffer while you enjoyed the fruit of my labor." I stepped back, moving my feet so he couldn't touch them. "The Grace you knew is dead. You and your family killed her with your cruelty. This version of me doesn't belong to you." My father came to the door and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Go inside, Grace. I will handle this." He looked at David, the boy he had once treated like a son. "David, my daughter is not a second-hand cloth you pick up when your expensive silk is torn. You owe her a debt you can never fully pay, but you will start by staying away from this house." As David crawled away into the darkness, I realized that my revenge wasn't going to be about making them suffer physically. It was about living a life so beautiful and successful that they would have to watch from the shadows, knowing they could have been a part of it if they weren't so greedy. My father turned to me and smiled. "Tomorrow we open the new wing of the farm. You are the CEO, Grace. It's time the world sees what a village girl can really do." The opening of Thompson Poultry and Integrated Farms was the biggest event the village had seen in decades. My father had used the documents and the retrieved funds to expand the small business I had started in secret. I stood at the podium, dressed in a vibrant Ankara gown, looking at the faces of the people who had once watched me scrub floors in shame. Even the governor's representative was there to see the young woman who built an empire from the soil. As I gave my speech, I saw Mrs Benson and her daughter standing at the very edge of the crowd, near the dusty road. They weren't invited, but they couldn't stay away. They looked hungry and tired. The village women who used to fear Mrs Benson's sharp tongue now walked past her without a word. I realized then that the greatest punishment for people who think they are better than everyone else is to be ignored by the very people they try to look down upon. I was no longer Grace the servant, I was Grace the CEO. The legal hammer finally fell. Because David and his family could not produce the money they owed within the 30 days, the court ordered the auction of their house and all their belongings. The day of the auction was a spectacle. People from neighboring villages came to bid on the sofa Sarah had lounged on and the bed David had slept in while I was in the storehouse. I sat in a car across the street, watching as the auctioneer hammered away their pride. Mrs. Benson sat on the ground wailing as her royal curtains were carried out by a stranger. David stood by the wall, looking like a ghost. He had tried to get a job in the city, but word of his fraud had spread so far that no one would hire him. He was a man with no degree, no money, and now no home. The family that once thought they were too good for the village was now at the mercy of the village's charity. In a final twist of justice, the mysterious buyer who won the auction for the Benson house was revealed. It was a holding company my father had set up in my name. I walked into the compound I had once scrubbed on my knees, but this time the keys were in my hand. David and his family were standing by the gate with their few remaining clothes in plastic bags. Mrs. Benson fell to her knees when she saw me. "Grace, my daughter, please have mercy. Don't throw us into the street." I looked at the house I had paid for with 5 years of my life. "I am not like you, Mrs. Benson," I said firmly. "I will not throw you into the street. You can stay in the 7th quarters at the back. It is small and the roof leaks a bit, but it is more than you gave me. You will work on my farm to pay off the rest of your debt. You will earn your bread honestly." The sight of the once mighty Bensons working as laborers on my farm became a living lesson for every young man and woman in the village. Clara and Mary, who used to mock my rough hands, now spend their days sorting eggs and cleaning the chicken coops. David was assigned to the heavy lifting, carrying sacks of feed under the same sun he once said was too harsh for Sarah. They were not treated with cruelty, but they were treated with the firmness of a boss who knows their worth. Every time David looked at me, I could see the regret burning in his eyes. He saw me thriving, driving my own car, and being respected by leaders, and he knew that all of it could have been his if he had only been a man of integrity. He had traded a diamond for a piece of broken glass, and now he had to live with the shards. Standing on the balcony of my home, watching the sunset over the vast green lands of my farm, I felt a deep sense of peace. I had endured the darkest nights, but they only made my morning brighter. My parents sat nearby, drinking palm wine and laughing, their hearts full of pride. I had turned my pain into power and my betrayal into a business. The village no longer talked about the bride whose shadow walked home alone. They talked about the woman who owned the sun. I realized that the best revenge isn't about hurting those who hurt you. It's about outgrowing them so completely that they become a tiny speck in your rearview mirror. I was Grace Thompson, a daughter of Africa, and I was finally, truly free. The story you have just heard is a beautiful African tale I heard long ago. I'm telling you to wake your minds to the fact that your current struggle is not your final destination, and those who try to bury you often forget that you are a seed. If you were Grace, what would you do? Would you have let them stay in the servants' quarters, or would you have sent them away forever? I want to know your opinion, because every story is like a candle that can light the path for someone else. God bless you, and may courage guide your hands. Meanwhile, on the final screen, I am leaving you with one of the channel's most beloved folktales. I'm sure you'll love it. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.